Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode we're doing It Came From The Network. Topic of this It Came From The Network, the best of CM Punk versus Samoa Joe. This is obviously a Blu-ray. I purchased it online from IVP Videos. I'm going to put a link down here in the description. They do a lot of fantastic compilations, a lot of Japanese wrestling, a lot of stuff like this, a lot of hard to find stuff. If you want a specific, let's say, Pro Wrestling Noah show, they have it. If you want a specific era of New Japan Pro Wrestling, All Japan Pro Wrestling, they have it. And it's kind of like being a tape trader back in the day. You could go on there, you could find awesome compilations like this. You could find specific shows that they have. You can find specific dates. I definitely recommend checking them out. I believe this was $9.99, which it's well worth it. First off, where are you going to find a Blu-ray for $9.99? I know they're kind of going out and you probably got them all in bargain bins, but for what you get here, it is definitely worth it. Now, if you haven't seen my videos before, I do rate everything on a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. We're going to go match by match on this Blu-ray disc. The first match is Samoa Joe versus CM Punk from Ring of Honor, Bitter Friends, Stiffer Enemies. And if I don't mention that it's Ring of Honor, most of these are Ring of Honor, so if I don't mention a promotion, it's going to be Ring of Honor. This is an early match which predates what is considered their trilogy. In Ring of Honor, there are 3 matches for the World Championship. This is before that. This is kind of, I guess you could say, a somewhat proving ground match for CM Punk to prove that he belongs with Joe in that kind of higher echelon there. I really enjoyed this match. I thought it was really fun. Watching this back, and it's going to be a theme throughout this, watching this era of Ring of Honor, watching these guys, reminded me why I fell in love with Ring of Honor in the first place. Something about what they were doing was so special and so different, and it wasn't just a cut and paste ECW clone, which a lot of the early independents of the early 2000s were, where it wasn't a cut and paste WWE clone or, you know, leftover from the 90s. This was something different. This felt like an evolution of All Japan Pro Wrestling in the 90s. Kind of like an American version of the King's Road style. And that's not to say that they didn't have variety. They obviously had some mixed in stuff from other genres. Some of the leftover ECW kind of hardcore stuff would make it on the shows. Some of the European style would definitely make it on, especially once guys like Nigel McGuinness came over. But I digress. We're talking more about the company than we are about the match. This is a really good match. Samoa Joe picks up the win here, but CM Punk hangs. He makes himself look like a credible contender here. Afterwards, we get a Chris Daniels involvement in this, which again, another early highlight. Christopher Daniels is highly, highly underrated. I know Samoa Joe and CM Punk both get their flowers, but CD needs to get his flowers too. He's a guy that it baffles me how he was never TNA champion because of how much he meant to that company. But that's another story for another day. For this match, I'm going to give this a 4. I thought it was really good. Next up, we have a 4-corner survival match. We have Steve Corino versus CM Punk versus Christopher Daniels versus Samoa Joe. And again, here we have 4 guys that are just amazing. Steve Corino is one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. So are Punk and Joe, and Daniels, of course. And this was from Ring of Honor Main Event Spectacle. This is a cool match because there was kind of a partnership arrangement, I guess you could say, between Punk and Corino, where they were obviously the quasi heels of this, even though Steve Corino, if you know about the early years of Ring of Honor, you know he was basically the ultimate heel there. He was the one that refused the Code of Honor. I liked the psychology in this, and I liked how they worked this match and how they kind of stayed away from each other in a way that was interesting, and how Punk and Corino worked it to where they had the advantage through the whole match. I did also find the ending very interesting because it should have been a 1 fall to a finish match. However, at the end, both Punk and Corino get pins at the same time and they're counted at the same time, thus giving us a dual winner, CM Punk and Steve Corino, which kind of fits because they had worked with each other through the whole match. Made sense. The story made sense. I'm giving this a 4. Next up, from Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, an inch longer than average. We have another early CM Punk and Samoa Joe match. Actually, I think this was after their trilogy or in the middle of their trilogy. The dates I don't remember, to be honest with you. But this was yet another example of these two guys who are two of the best in the world at the time, putting on just another fantastic match in front of another crowd. And it is funny, the thing that I took out of this, which was a little bit surprising here, watching this back and, again, watching PWG of the era, I always thought that Excalibur was a pretty good announcer, and I know there's a lot of people that dislike Excalibur. I think he's gone a little bit too over the top in AEW, to be honest with you. He's not as good as he used to be. And when I watch this back, it's him and Disco Machine are on the call here. And you could tell this was very early in his career as a announcer, because he's good, but he's not as good as he would be, and he's not as natural as he would be. It felt a little bit forced here. And that's kind of what I get with him in AEW. It feels like he's a little over dramatic at times. Whereas if you get to maybe a couple years after this, all the way up until he stopped calling PWG shows, and I don't know if he still does or not. I haven't watched a PWG show since the pandemic, so I'm not sure if he's still calling them or not. But if you watch and you listen to him there, he was really good, even if he was by himself. My favorite time was when he would have Kevin Steen with him on commentary, obviously. This is another really good match. Joe picks up the win again. Afterwards, we see Scrap Iron Adam Pearce come out, which is cool for you people that may not know that he was a wrestler and just know him from his appearances on WWE. He comes out, it looks like there might be tension between him and Punk. However, they hug. Obviously, they're both from Chicago. They both love promoting the fact that they're from Chicago. I believe they were in a faction in PWG here. If it wasn't PWG, it was somewhere else, called the Gold Bond Mafia, which was them, and the other person I'm thinking of right off the top of my head is Dave Prazak, and I know there were a couple other members. If you know what I'm talking about, hit me in the comments here. I don't remember what promotion it was in specifically, because at this time, you were getting so many different matches from so many different areas, whether it be IWA Mid-South, Ring of Honor, Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, any of the 30 different indie promotions that would have these same matches going on. So yeah, it was somewhere they did a Gold Bond Mafia kind of thing. And I want to say because of this it was PWG, but I might be wrong. Overall, this was another good match, a really good match. I'm giving this one a 4 again. I thought it was really good. Next up, from Ring of Honor World Title Classic, we have the first of what is called the trilogy in Ring of Honor, Samoa Joe versus CM Punk. And this, to me, it's so hard to say, because it'd be like saying, which of your children is your favorite? Which of your pets are your favorite out of the matches? I lean towards this being my favorite of the three, because at the time it was very shocking what happened here, and at the time what they did was so revolutionary and so different from what was going on in the world of wrestling. Juxtapose this versus what you were seeing on SmackDown and Raw in 2004, which was when this happened, or even in TNA in 2004. You weren't seeing matches like this. This was a match that was a modern version of Steamboat vs. Savage, or Dusty Rhodes vs. Ric Flair. This was probably psychologically one of the best matches that you'll ever see. Whether it be Ring of Honor in this era, whether it be any of the matches I brought up, I would definitely put this as one of my maybe 10 to 20 favorite matches of all time. This is an absolute classic, hence why the name of it's a World Title Classic. I believe at the time Ring of Honor was naming their shows after the fact, and some of them, you know, the anniversary or Death Before Dishonor got named before, but for the most part, for their just random shows between, they would name them after the fact, which makes sense why they named this. And this was a match, they won a full 1 hour draw here, which I know a lot of people don't like 1 hour draws, and to me, if it's worked properly, I think it could work, and it still could work today. We've seen that with Danielson and Omega a couple of years ago. This could still work. This format could still work. You just have to have the right guys to do it. And for the last about 20 minutes of this match, the crowd is totally standing on their feet, because there's so much that's going into that, so much to that finish, where is he going to be able to pull it off? Is Joe going to be able to survive? Do they have enough left in the tank? And that's a lot of what went into this. They would hit a big move, but then they wouldn't have enough left in their tank to cover the other guy. And the way they worked this was just so fantastic. This is an all-time great match in my opinion. Afterwards, we have the crowd cheering 5 more minutes, which obviously is a thing when you have hour-long Broadways. Homicide comes out and attacks Samoa Joe, which him and Samoa Joe had a kind of feud going on here. That way it takes away the crowd requesting the 5 more minutes so they don't have to go into that and have a winner. This was fantastic. Like I said, as you could probably guess by all of the good words I'm saying here, I'm giving this match a 5. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. Next up, from Scramble Cage Mayhem from Ring of Honor, we get a 3-way match. We get Samoa Joe versus CM Punk versus Homicide. Here comes Homicide into the mix. Another, I think, underrated guy. There's so many underrated wrestlers, especially that didn't get to break through onto the WWE level in this era. Homicide, Christopher Daniels, Steve Corino even could be considered one. But they're such great wrestlers, and especially this time. Homicide was absolutely on fire in this time, and he was one of the best wrestlers in the world. And if you only know him through LAX, which he was great in LAX and in TNA, you may not have seen Homicide's best work, and some of his best work was this era of Ring of Honor. This is a fantastically worked 3-way match. They all had a reason to hate each other. They all had a reason to want to win this. It made a ton of sense. Punk hits his Pepsi plunge. However, Homicide knocks Punk off of Joe so Homicide could get the pin, and this is a non-title match. Joe was the world champion at the time. So we see a couple things here. First off, Homicide, actually gets the pin on Joe, so he has contention to be in the mix for the world title. Punk gave the move that basically finished Joe, so if he would have been able to pin him, he would have beat him, and then he could have been in the mix in the world title, thus setting up a different ways they could go here, which is what you love to see from a 3-way match, seeing different directions they could go coming out of the match. This was so perfect in what they did here. I absolutely love this. Homicide did pick up the win. I'm giving this one a 5 as well. I love the storytelling that they're doing in the match here. And I know that was a big criticism for people that didn't quite get into Ring of Honor back in the day, that there wasn't storytelling or there wasn't stories. A lot of the time the storytelling happened in the match. It didn't happen necessarily on promos, which they did. They did do promos. There'd be promos on their DVDs. There are promos they put up on their website. A lot of their wrestlers were very highly involved on their message board, and you would get some of that story there. So if you weren't immersed, I could see where you would say that. But for me, this is a great in-ring story. I love what they did here. Next up, it's a second match in what's considered the trilogy. From Ring of Honor, Joe versus Punk 2, Samoa Joe versus CM Punk. This again kind of built on what they did at World Title Classic and added to it a little bit. There was more of a sense of urgency from Punk. He seemed to work at a faster rate. They took the things they did in the first match, or the first canonically in the trilogy, and they expanded on them. What worked, they worked on more. If there was a knee bar that worked, they kept working in that here. Joe worked Punk's arm over here, worked his knee over. This thing was another fantastic match, and I believe this is the one of the 3 that Dave Meltzer gave a 5-star to. He gave one of the 3 a 5-star. I believe this is it, and I could definitely see why. To me, the first one I like a bit better because there was a little bit of an element of surprise with the way it ended up in a draw, where this one, much like the first one, it does go the full hour. They do end up in a draw, but I almost expected it to go that way, and that's not a knock on these guys. These guys did a fantastic job here. I still very much love this match. I still think it's awesome. It's, out of the 3, it's my least favorite of the 3, but that would be, like I said, like saying, who's your favorite child or who's your favorite pet? Anything like that. You love all of them and you try to love them as equally as possible. I'm going to give this one another solid 5. Like I said, it is fantastic. I love this match. I highly, highly recommend this. I highly recommend everything on this, as a matter of fact, and we'll keep talking about it, and I'm bring it up again at the end. Last but not least, for the trilogy, their third match in this era, in this time frame, or whatever you may say, from Ring of Honor All-Star Extravaganza, CM Punk versus Samoa Joe. This match is predicated by Ricky Steamboat coming out and saying that he's going to sit and watch us from ringside, which added a little bit of importance to this, well, a lot of credibility to it, and this is phenomenal. The thing I love about this, and a lot of these matches are very long, an hour, 40 minutes and such, this match was marked as a no time limit match. In other words, we're going to have a winner, which automatically puts into your head they're going to go beyond an hour. But they didn't. They went about 35, 40 minutes here. I don't know the exact timing. I know it wasn't an hour. And Samoa Joe picks up the win, which another thing that's a virtue, because you're thinking, okay, Punk is finally going to get over that hill. He's finally going to beat Joe, but he doesn't. Joe keeps going on, and Joe keeps being the dominant force that he was. And there's a lot to criticize about Ring of Honor, about especially this time during Gabe Sapolsky's run as the head booker, where it feels like there were times he didn't pull the trigger quick enough, either here with Joe or Bryan Danielson or Homicide. There's a bunch of guys that it feels like he waited a little bit too long. Tyler Black's another one. But I think in certain instances, it also worked. It worked here because Punk wasn't going to get less popular. He wasn't going to be less of a contention. Everybody knew he was one of the best guys on the roster. He would eventually get the belt. But throwing this monkey wrench here, this is that thing that we all tune in for. If everything was predictable all the time, there'd be no reason to watch. Like I said, Joe does pick up the win here. I think this is fantastic. This is my second favorite of the three that are in the trilogy. Again, it's going to be a solid 5 for me. I think all three of them are fantastic. Like I said, it's probably one of the better quote-unquote trilogies of all time. I really enjoyed this. I thought it was awesome. Next up on the DVD or Blu-ray, from Ring of Honor Back to Basics, we get a tag match. CM Punk is tagging with Spanky, aka Brian Kendrick, because his tag team partner Carino's not there for the show, or Colt Cabana, funny to say, now had already worked twice, so he's not going to be able to wrestle again. Ace Steel is in Chicago, so he needed a partner. Spanky stepped up. And they're going up against Samoa Joe and basically his young boy, who is Jay Lethal. And that's really cool to see this, and a lot of people don't know that Jay Lethal was basically Samoa Joe's young boy, or Samoa Joe's trainee, I guess you could say. And again, here's another match with just 4 awesome Ring of Honor wrestlers. I know Spanky has gone on Brian Kendrick and said some outrageous things and have put himself in some hot water, but that doesn't take away from the fact that he is just a fantastic wrestler, especially in this time frame. This was a really fun match. These two teams all work so well together. Obviously, Joe and Punk have worked several matches with each other. Joe and Lethal work together great as a team. Spanky and Punk seem to work very well for a team that I don't think before this ever teamed together. But this was a great mix of 4 excellent talents at the time. We get towards the end of the match, and out comes Stevie Richards. And I love Stevie. Shout out Stevie, you are awesome. I know you're never going to see this, but in case you do, you're amazing. Stevie's another guy. We'll throw him on that list of underappreciated wrestlers. But Stevie comes out. He super kicks CM Punk, thus costing them the win. Jay Lethal gets a pin on CM Punk. A big pin for him in his career, especially at this time, showing that he could elevate to that upper level, even though it was Stevie Richards' fault that he got that pin. I thought this was a great tag team match. Joe and Lethal pick up the win here. I'm giving this one a 4. I thought it was really good. Next up is a match that prior to this Blu-ray, I don't think I ever seen before. And it's from TWC International Showdown, which I believe was a United Kingdom company. It definitely has a feel. The commentary team feels like they're from the United Kingdom. And this is Samoa Joe versus CM Punk again. And I know I say again, and it kind of sounds like I'm getting tired of it, but I'm not. I'm just stating because most of this is either a singles match with Joe and Punk or some combination of these guys. This again is really good. I would put this right on par with the PWG match that's also on this compilation. I wouldn't put it as good as any of the 3 solo Ring of Honor matches, just because to me those are all better than this. And it's not a knock on these two guys. These two guys just set the bar so high that it's hard to, live up to that basic. I'm sure if you look at Steamboat and Flair, other than their trilogy in '89, there's probably some house show matches. I know people say their house show matches were even better than what was on the TV or pay-per-view. However, I guarantee there's a couple house show matches that weren't as great. But anyway, I digress. Whether it be a time thing, whether it be the storyline in this, they did still put on a really good match here. Samoa Joe does pick up the win, which seems to be the theme going through this. It's Samoa Joe has CM Punk's number. I'm giving this one a 4. I thought it was really good. Now we get to the final match of the compilation. This was from the Summer of Punk, from Ring of Honor Redemption. Quick backstory, CM Punk had won the Ring of Honor Championship finally. However, as soon as he won, he turned heel and said, I'm leaving for the WWE and I'm taking this belt with me. He signs his WWE contract legitimately in a Ring of Honor ring on the Ring of Honor belt, which was just such a great moment in history. And it kind of felt cool because during this Summer of Punk, the original Summer of Punk, he kind of took away the fans' ability to basically give him a proper send-off until the very last match, which was Punk the Final Chapter, I think it's called, is the last one in Chicago. This is the night before that, or the show before that at the very least. And CM Punk is still the world champion here. And in this, he's got a 4-way match going up against Samoa Joe, Christopher Daniels, and James Gibson. Now, you may or may not be familiar with James Gibson. James Gibson is the wrestler more commonly known as Jamie Noble. This was during a time where he had left WWE and before he would come back. He was only in Ring of Honor for a very short period, but his time there was fantastic. This was James Gibson, Jamie Noble, getting to show off how great he was and how underused he was in WWE. And even going back to WCW, he was a bit underused. He was given the opportunity to shine in Ring of Honor, and I think if you ask him, and you ask anybody that watches this is the high watermark of his career. This was a great match. The story, of course, is Punk is going to take his championship and leave for WWE. The 3 men he's facing here are probably the 3 guys with the best chance of taking that belt from him in this match and restoring honor to the championship. And it was an elimination match, which added a little bit of importance. It added a bit of drama to it, because who's going to get knocked out first? If we knock out the more people that get eliminated, the more chance that Punk is going to keep this title. So we get into it. First off, Christopher Daniels gets eliminated first. He's followed up by Samoa Joe getting eliminated, which leaves us to CM Punk and James Gibson, basically the final 2. And this was your classic underdog versus overpowered heel, the heel that nobody could stop up until this point, and now he's facing this underdog upstart that came into the company. And I want to address something. If you do watch this, he is wearing the rebel flag on his trunks, and he comes out with the rebel flag wrapped around him. I don't think Jamie Noble or James Gibson is a racist. I just think it was his way of showing he was a Southern boy. I mean, the Briscoe brothers did the same thing. They would wear rebel flag headbands, and they had it on their gear as well. They had rebel flag jackets. Matter of fact, I have a Briscoe brothers poster somewhere in here from way back in the day that they're wearing the rebel flag headbands on and everything on that. It's a different time, so it wasn't looked at quite the same as it is now. It just, at this time, especially in wrestling, it signified you were a Southerner. So if you do watch this, try not to get offended by that if you haven't seen it before. And I love what he did here, because he had the orange trunks with the 0-1, so it was basically the General Lee from Dukes of Hazzard, which is a great show. I rewatched it recently, probably a couple of years back, and I know I'm going off on a tangent, and it still holds up. It does not feel racist at all. Could be because there's hardly anybody ever in the show that isn't a white person, but that's a different story for a different day. This was great when we got to this point. Gibson had been injured earlier in the match, and it seemed like CM Punk was going to win and walk away the champion, go into his final show in Chicago with that and take that belt to WWE. However, Gibson comes right out of the back. He's being followed by staff basically telling him no. Classic, what they used to call the Spirit of 76 type thing, where a tag partner would get injured, he'd be out for most of the match, come back at the very end. Classic wrestling story here. Gibson pulls out the win, thus restoring the honor to Ring of Honor's World Championship. CM Punk gets the adulation from the crowd here, who wants to give him a proper send-off, but with the way the story is being told, he's not allowing them to, and especially the next show we would see that definitely, and that show's not on this compilation, but you get what I'm saying. I love this. I love the story going into this. I love the story that was told during the match. I love the evolution and elevation of James Gibson. This was absolutely fantastic. I'm giving this a 5. Now, with all that being said, again, we have the Blu-ray here. Best of CM Punk and Samoa Joe. Get this at IVP Videos. Again, link is going to be in the description. Please check them out. If you don't buy this, I guarantee there is something on there that you will like, that you will want to purchase. It's all very fairly priced. It's a really good service. They're doing a whole lot to preserve the history of pro wrestling, and I just wish people would support stuff like that more, and I hope you do. I hope you go there. This is not promoted in any way. I purchased this. I didn't get this for free. I'm not asking for anything for free. I'm not even asking for anything to promote him here, but they do an awesome job. They make awesome compilations. Please check them out. With that being said, let's talk about this all together. I loved everything here. The one thing I will say is I watched this all in one sitting, basically, from beginning to end, and that may not be the best idea when you're watching the same two guys wrestle. In this case, I did like it. I did feel at times a little burnout on CM Punk and Samoa Joe. So I would recommend, if you do this, maybe breaking it up, watch 3 matches one night, watch 3 matches another night, and so on and so forth. Or if you're just weird like me and you're okay with going through this, watch it all at once. They are longer matches, so most of these are 20 minutes plus. If you're not a fan of long matches like this, it's probably not the compilation for you. But if you want to see the building blocks of everything that's going on pro wrestling now, whether AEW directly comes from this Ring of Honor era. The stars on here, Samoa Joe, CM Punk, Homicide, Jay Lethal. These are all guys that would be basically the standard bearers for pro wrestling over the next 2 decades. From this, of course. You have underrated legends here like Daniels, like Carino, James Gibson even. I would say he's very underrated. Spanky even is underrated. This is just a phenomenal compilation. I absolutely love this. The whole thing is getting a 5. I cannot recommend this more. I definitely highly recommend checking this out. Please go check them out. Give them a shout out. Purchase something, because keeping companies like this in business is best for wrestling fans, and it's best for people like yourself and myself. With all that being said, if you made that to the end here and you'd like to keep me in business, smash the like button, share the video, subscribe if you haven't. If you see where it says join, that's how you become a channel member. Becoming a channel member definitely helps me out. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and you've been watching It Came From the Network.